Many people think of Russia's colonial empire only in terms of Alaska, but the Russian Empire did not stop at the northwest coast of America and spread further south. It even reached California and founded a colony there, and Russia eventually stretched its fingers as far as Hawaii. So today we are going to take a look at the entire history of the Russian colonial empire, see where Russia was active and why it ultimately lost everything again. The history of the Russians in America begins with the fact that the Russian Empire continued to expand eastwards, eventually reaching the end of the Eurasian continent. Nevertheless, it continued to expand eastwards towards Alaska, particularly in search of species-rich trapping areas for the fur trade. The first European expedition to set foot in Alaska was that of the Dane Vitus Bering in the year 1741, who crossed the Bering Strait, which was later named after him, on behalf of the Russian emperor. Only a few years later, the first Russian fur trappers also reached Alaska and the first towns were founded in Alaska to improve hunting. The city of Kodiak developed into the capital and became the main trading center for furs in Northwest America. In the year 1795, all fur hunting companies were merged to form the Russian-American Company, which now had a monopoly on fur hunting. Similar to other colonial powers with their West and East Indian companies, the aim was not only to promote trade, but also to colonize more and more land. This worked very well as business flourished, particularly through the sale of sea otter pelts to China, and the colonies continued to grow. However, the Russian thirst for discovery was far from exhausted and more voyages of discovery were undertaken to ever more southerly regions. One of the founders of the Russian-American Company even developed the plan to take the entire North American Pacific coast into Russian possession. During a voyage of discovery in the year 1803, the Russians sailed as far as San Diego and Baja California. During the voyage, the explorers also found plenty of sea otters, which was very convenient as the sea otter population in Alaska was dwindling. Another problem for the Russians in Alaska was that the harsh environment in the far north made it very difficult to maintain the colonies and provide the settlers with sufficient supplies. They therefore increasingly turned their attention to warm California. Even though the Spanish had already taken possession of it, it was still far too sparsely populated and there were numerous free, as yet uninhabited areas. The Tsar therefore sent an expedition to California to find a suitable location for the first settlement. Bodega Bay, which was located north of San Francisco Bay, was chosen as the best location for a colony. The surrounding area was rich in raw materials and the bay had a good strategic location in case the Spanish came knocking. The settlement was completed relatively quickly and inaugurated in the year 1812, on the name day of Tsar Alexander I. It was given the name Fort Ross, probably as the name for Russia or Russia. The colony as a whole was referred to as the Ross Colony. From Fort Ross, the Russians also undertook voyages of discovery to other parts of North America. There was even an attempt to colonize the Sandwich Islands, which were later renamed Hawaii. However, the number of Russians in America was too small to maintain a permanent colony there. Especially as the colony in California also had an increasingly difficult time over the decades. The problem was similar to that in Alaska. Due to the intensive hunting of sea otters, the population of the animals continued to decline and the colony was increasingly deprived of its livelihood. In addition, pressure from other colonial powers continued to increase. Spain and Great Britain in particular were watching the Russian colonial adventures with an evil eye. Spain was actually laying claim to the entire North American Pacific coast. British traders, hunters and explorers were pushing ever closer to Russian territories, and then there was the United States, which was expanding ever further west. So the Russian government decided to sell its colony in California in good time before a conflict with another power arose. Fort Ross was sold to a Swiss Californian landowner in the year 1841. Only 7 years later, the whole of California was annexed by the USA, and in the year 1851 it became the 31st state to join the United States. Alaska remained in Russian hands for another 2 decades until it too fell to the USA in the year 1867. Thus ended the Russian colonial empire in America.